Yo, what is up, YouTube boxing family? It is K right here. Alright, let's get right into it. I'm going to be talking about why American heavyweight boxing can easily dominate the sport of boxing, but why not a lot of American heavyweight boxing talent is being generated a lot. So, yeah, let's get right into it. I know that I haven't really been uploading a lot. I will upload this to the YouTube, but yeah, the thing is that American heavyweight boxing is in a drought, as far as producing talent, just simply because like back then you had guys that had they had like a lot of interest to get into boxing, and I will definitely say if you want to become more modernistic back in the day, I probably say even at least from like the 1800s leading up until the 19 well, I would probably say the early 2000s if you want to keep it realistic, at least like around 2005 to 2010, but starting from like at least at the 1800s by like 1830 through 1840, that's where American heavyweight boxing was at its best, where you had talent from like all different racial creeds, like minus guys that were cheating and all that crazy nonsense with Jack Dempsey and some other dirty ass fighters. But I would definitely say like the best fighters per se were definitely like Rocky Marciano, Joe Louis, Jack Johnson, um, Floyd Patterson, a lot of really good American level talent, and it was mostly Black Americans, and I think that's really what makes up like a lot of our good talent that you see today, where you see a lot of the good, well-known American heavyweight boxing talent, which would be guys like Deontay Wilder, Jared Big Baby Anderson, at one point Jarrell Big Baby Miller before he cheated, definitely guys like Stephen Big Shot Shaw, and used to be good at back in the day, but I'm kind of thinking he's a little bit faded. Jermaine Franklin, in which he needs to work on stamina and defense, but yeah, I mean, like there's like plenty of great names that you see today that's just obviously not producing enough young guys, because like a lot of heavyweights that you see now, a lot of them are very old, because for one, you don't produce a lot of big guys that want to be interested to get punched in the face in boxing compared to football, basketball, baseball, hockey, even in some cases soccer. That's really what a lot of American heavyweight guys will most likely get into, but it's mostly football and basketball, because if you think about it, you have a much higher chance to make it to the NFL and the NBA compared to the MLB, or I guess even hockey with the NHL, and then I guess like the other tertiary level sports that do pay well. I mean, it's not really something out of a regular tall guys interests in America, at least, to think about getting into boxing and starting to actually compete at a high level to start hurting people in the ring. But I think the best way to fix this is to have boxing instituted at the college level, at least, and therefore you can get fighters to go pro, and that will inspire a lot of guys to get away from the mindset of getting into major sports like basketball or football or hockey or baseball. So I mean, the thing is like obviously there's a lot of status corruption behind boxing compared to basketball and American football. A lot of people look at those sports to be like, okay, you can easily get a full ride scholarship going to Duke University, and you don't have to worry about any expenses because you're going to school, full free ride, and you don't have to worry about your dorm. You don't have to worry about healthcare, like quote unquote healthcare. Like I don't know how that really works in college. When you do have a free ride, I would assume that you could get some form of like a health insurance, but I think most people would just buy their own through a regular full-time job, but I don't know how that works out. But the thing is like when you try to institute this idea into boxing, I think the best way to recruit better heavyweights is to one, there should be like Fight Club, tournaments. There should be like tryouts in boxing where, I wouldn't like just just hear me out. I'm sorry. If you had certain promotional management groups, like a, how should I say, like kind of similar with like what you see with like BKFC, right? That's like a fight league of its own. That's naturally grown into being a very, very tough, hard fought sport. But if you could do it with the right, channels, like certain promotional boxing managements, like for instance, like let's just say if I make me a really good boxing management company, and if I'm trying to look for good talent, I should start hosting boxing tryout sparring sessions where you can show me your skills and you can produce the right amount of talent to get the guys off the street to say, hey, get into boxing. You could have that type of level where, if guys want to start getting into the sport, there should be like fight leagues for guys that have no experience in boxing, but you can get into this league. You could have like a trainer with you, or like I'm not even trying to be crazy with this, but it's like obviously like you have to think about things outside the box to recruit better talent in the sport. But the hardest thing like about it is like you need to get like the young guys that are like antsy, like they actually really want to put hands on somebody, and you have to get those dudes that are actually like mad young, that could actually do it, versus like once they hit like their quote unquote young adult years heading into their old years in their 30s, that's what's going to drive somebody away to be like, well, man, I wish I kind of did this when I was like 13 or 14, versus like if you're going to get into heavyweight boxing by like 24 years old, but then you go pro at 26. I mean, everything happens for a reason, obviously, but I think the best way to do it is that there needs to be foundational fight leagues where you have like boxing sanctuary clubs where you have tournaments held, kind of like what the amateurs do now. But it's like if you want to fight somebody, you could like you could technically get into a boxing professional boxing tournament where you fight people around your level and you get better by getting paid for it, and then that can inspire somebody to get into the pros. And I guess as far as like what I'm trying to say is like, look at what Team Combat League's doing. I'm not saying like guys should just go through that type of motion and you just only fight one round and that's it, or in certain cases some fighters do fight more than one round depending on how many guys are on the team. But per se, when you think about it, how that's strategized with Team Combat League, that's obviously through a team, and that's kind of hindering your skills because it's like you're not really getting enough rounds garnered for yourself. You're only getting one round, if not maybe two or three, depending on the supply and demand based off of those teams resources to have fighters fight for certain rounds to compete for the team. But as far as like an individualist base setting, I would say it would be better to have tournament leagues where if you don't know anything about boxing, you obviously want to get into it, you obviously want to get rounds in to get good. I would say there should be kind of like what you see with Street Beats, where you have individual sign up tournaments and you train for X amount of months to get good. And this will be like actual professional style fights, but it doesn't actually get put on your record. It like you'll have like a pretty much like a pseudo record where it doesn't affect you in the pros. Like it's like a unofficial base record where you just basically compete against guys that are at your skill level, kind of like what YouTube Boxing does with DAZN X Series, where most of the time, most of those guys are fighting each other around their skill level, but you're doing it with guys that are actual, normal base civilians, where, you can get all these young, top heavyweight, hungry, athletic built dudes that look like that they should be playing basketball or football, but you can get these guys to actually, to actually fight. And then what could happen is that you could have certain trainers that could go out to these events to see what guys have, and they could be scouts in a way to recruit heavyweight talent. So therefore, if those heavyweights are good enough to compete, at least you have that in your arsenal of potential talent that you could actually surf around, and you could actually get these guys, hired to be a potential fighter to work with. Obviously, that's a lot harder than expected, because it's like, not every trainer is gonna have the time to go see some dudes, actually punch each other, at some, low tier level event where it's just mostly guys that are obviously young, but if they don't have the right training regimen, behind them, and they're just going out there getting paid to fight each other, which I do believe, like, look, if you could have that, like, those type of markets built where you could actually pay guys to fight each other, and oh man, I'm sorry, but seriously, if you want to get if you want to get heavyweight talent recruited, a good way to do it is to have leagues that are generating money to give guys the incentive to fight each other while they're young. Obviously, you can easily get like a good load of, like, I guess, like, young teenagers that are like I don't even know, but let's just say that you could get like 17, 18-year-old guys that are going to, get paid to obviously beat each other up for at least 4 rounds, I would say. And at least with that, you can produce good talent where they're actually training for a good, decent paycheck. And then if like a boxing team likes them, they could get picked up. It's kind of it's kind of like a free agency type of tryout type of mode where you can get a lot of potential good talent hired on a roster. But with the other option that I had with college producing boxing, where you could have actual teams, but you actually do it in rounds. Well, not just one person per round like Team Combat League. You could actually have professional boxing events, but it's at the college level where both teams fight each other, but it's actual guys and girls that can get into the sport. And then you could have like trainers, that can, get hired to actually run a team, in which I probably just say like fighters could just train by themselves, in which obviously, economically speaking, if you're going to have trainers run a college team, it has to be like good high level trainers. But the problem with that is that trainers can easily take advantage of that and utilize, whatever type of methods that they want to do with their team, in which I think, look, if it takes a certain amount of experience needed to become a college football coach and a basketball coach at any D1 through D3 school setting, then I would assume for boxing there needs to be like a proper mode with having good trainers hired at any high scale college setting. And I think the best way to do it is to have trainers that actually do want to get paid. But on top of that, a fighter could also bring their trainer with them. So, like, if a fighter has like a good trainer with them that's already trained them since, let's just say, the amateurs, and then they go to college, and then they get like a full ride scholarship at Duke University, but this trainer is with them to prepare them for fights and stuff like that. I think that's a good idea. Like, obviously, if I went without the option just to say that you fight on a boxing team and there's like no coaches, involved. It's just straight up team captains. And then you have, let the fighters just go at it with each other, which, the teams would have to obviously train, with each other in order to be quote unquote ready for a fight, or ready for a team versus team occurrence. to actually be prepared to fight somebody. So, you know, obviously that the need for trainers would definitely be, necessary if you want to have guys that are going to produce talent. And then if they're good enough at the college level with boxing, which I think that's a good idea, I would definitely like to see it, at a professional setting versus like, amateur. Well, I don't even know. Like I think amateur and pro, like pro fights can definitely be held at colleges, and you could have it set up like a team type of sport where you could have one amateur fight that's like a female fight for 6 round. Well, three 3 minute rounds, and after that you could have like a couple professional college boxing fights, and it could be like kind of like a setup with how World Combat League had their setup with Chuck Norris, where it's 3 rounds per fighter, but it's actually like good high quality level fights. But as far as what the ring goes, that the ring would have to be, I probably say like fairly small. I'm not saying like try to have like a like a like like have a ring designed as a Rock'em Sock'em Robots like type of setting, but you have it strategized in a way where a fighter can move around the ring, but they still have to be forced to fight, and therefore you get to see guys and girls just go at it, and then boom, whoever's going to do good will advance, more contribution for a college team to get more points to to potentially win per se. But either way, it's a much bigger, philosophical set of ideas that you would have to break down. But it would be very interesting to see how you can recruit more heavyweight talent, because it would be nice to see a lot more American heavyweight dudes get into boxing, which you could easily do it. It's just that not a lot of guys think about getting into boxing when you're like 6'7" or 6'8", but a guy that's like 6'1" or 6'2", he can definitely do boxing, but it's not like the first priority to get into it. But obviously every person's different of how they view boxing, but it's not like American talent is not good with heavyweight boxing. Heavyweight boxing can easily dominate the sport. It's just more like you have to actually get the talent together, and therefore you can get that talent put at a high level, and then those guys can start producing a massive influx of potential good names. Because I think the amateur system is a pretty good setup to get dudes into boxing, but I don't think that's a really good idea, because the amateur system obviously doesn't pay nobody, so you don't get paid for it. But at the college setting, for my potential idea, at least you get paid for it, and then you could work your way into becoming a professional fighter, where you get paid. You could get sponsored by companies that can support the shows or support the boxing events, because it would be good to see boxing on the NCAA network, but it's going to have to be more like a co-sponsored type of thing, where these fighters do need to get paid, because you're risking your life on the line to give to give the fans a good fight. But it's like you can't like restrict college athletes that are combat athletes to not get money, because they could easily die in one fight. So it's like, well, I want to just say one fight. They could easily die in any fight that they get into. So case in point, I think if you want to get heavyweight boxing back to where it should have been back in the old days, there needs to be more marketized innovations to get heavyweights inspired to actually get into boxing and do what they need to do, because it can happen. It's just more like heavyweights just need to get into the mode of actually wanting to do it, because obviously the heavyweights that you see today in America is just that not a lot of guys want to get into boxing, because A lot of heavyweights look at basketball and football to be their main go-to sport. So therefore, if you could get that mode of thinking away from basketball and football, and boxing could be a more higher paid sport, which theoretically, in principle, if boxing was at the number one sport in America, where you seen all the best talent go to boxing before basketball and football, in which if even if those sports were still powerhouse sports, boxing would easily have a lot more heavyweights and a lot more fighters populating the talent pool of potentially producing high level talent. So I think that's possible. It's just more like you have to get guys inspired to get inside that ring and actually fight somebody because, obviously, there's no more George Foremans in the world that have gifted, talent, but it's more like, they are out there. It's just like you have to get the guys inspired to get to the gym and actually keep them disciplined because if you incentivize them with money, that's good, but you have to also incentivize them with a purpose to become a fighter. Because if fighters were to get paid all this money, most idiots in the sport of boxing would take their most dangerous fights and then they would just get that money and then they would just basically get away from the sport. So if you want to get guys that are good in the sport, you have to get guys that are actually willing to stay in the sport. And obviously, guys like Deontay Wilder, that's a hidden talent that not a lot of people will ever see because it's more like when you look at what he's done in the sport, like just imagine if you went to all of what the worst, poorest areas in America and you got all of these like really like bad low income, children that are like, between the ages of like 15 and 19 years old, and out of let's just say maybe like 2,500 of them, you actually had like at least 100 to 300 guys that are actually naturally gifted at boxing. You would produce a powerhouse population with so many good talents that could easily populate the heavyweight division and the rest of the the rest of the high level divisions. So if you could do that and you can create a pattern where you could cycle that talent every every year, you will produce a lot of influence where a lot of guys will be very they'll be more motivated to get into the sport and actually do what they need to do. So either way, I think it's very possible to do it. You just have to get the talent motivated and the money has to be there for sure. But, once you get those young guys in, in boxing, and once they're motivated to stay in the sport, then I think the sport will be fine. But those are my potential ideas. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out. Bye.